Hi, this is the Social Jello with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Jello with Angelo show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Social Jello with Angelo podcast. I am here with Kai of Origins Combatives Gracie Jiu Jitsu, and as you saw in the title, sacrificing everything for Jiu Jitsu. Now, if I use my right thumbnail, you're going to see a picture of John Danaher. Did I say Danaher right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I always get, what's the serial killer's name? Donner. Yeah, Donner.
Yeah.
That's a bad way to mess with that guy's name. So then, not the serial killer. so if you saw the thumbnail, it was John Danaher, and I probably put like Hoist Gracie and some other great Roger Gracie. Roger Gracie? Is that a guy? Is that a thing? That's a man. Roger Gracie is a man.
Other Gracie, yeah.
Roger Gracie. That's why Cowie is here. To make sure I don't butcher Brazilian names. So Roger Gracie. And specifically Roger Gracie and John Danaher, who I want to talk about. So I know they're not on the show, and I'm sorry if you thought they were going to be on the show. Maybe one day. Doubt it, but hey, we'll never know. If listening to Joe Rogan and John Danaher talk about his personal life, he talks about not even having a relationship. Like pretty much he's married to jiu-jitsu, which as a jiu-jitsu enthusiast, as a martial artist, who am I? By the way, my name is Angelo. I said it earlier. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach and also MMA coach. And if I didn't say it, if you haven't caught on yet, the guy wearing the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu hat is also an MMA coach and also a Brazilian black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So this is where we're coming at it. I'm also a black belt in Kajuken. So like this is where we're kind of coming at this topic. And it can be generalized to all martial arts. So if you're familiar with the style, stick around because I think this is a good topic. I've talked to people from other styles too. But specifically in the jiu-jitsu community, when we hear a story about a man who went to Columbia University, I believe, I think it was Columbia University for John Danaher. I might be wrong. He went to a big school though, and I think it was Columbia. I might be wrong on that one. Say that right now. For anyone yelling, you can type it in right now. No, it's this university. But he went to a very good university and studied philosophy. And decided to, instead of getting into academia, got into jiu-jitsu and just poured everything into jiu-jitsu and arguably got very good results by looking at his team and how world famous he is in the jiu-jitsu community. But the part that gets me is just the other day, not even the other day, a few months ago, John Danaher's page said, he moved his academy to Texas, I believe. At the time, I don't know where he's at now, but at the time he was in Texas. And he said, driving a car sucks. I've never owned a car until now because he was in the East Coast and you can use public transportation most of the time. And I was just trying to wrap my head around being middle-aged and driving for the first time. And it just kind of gave me this idea that, yes, it's awesome to sacrifice everything for something you love. I get that. The internet loves it. But what does that really do for your personal life is my question as someone who studied psychology. There's these stages, generativity versus stagnation. Psychologists talk about being able to transition to the next part of your life and be healthy, and how people will find other ways to check the boxes. So rather than starting a family, they might pour everything to their career. And I think that's what's happening right here with the whole jiu-jitsu thing. So I guess I'm just going to grab this hot potato, hand it over to Kai, and see if he's observed what he thinks about this idea of sacrificing everything for, in this case, jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so that's very much so a thing in all martial arts. I would say especially the jiu-jitsu world. I think it has to do with a couple reasons. I think it has to do with the culture of Brazilian jiu-jitsu in general. And I think it also, that culture leads into who it attracts and the type of people it attracts, right? Like regarding John Danaher, the folks that you mentioned, I personally don't know John Danaher, but I know a lot of folks like him. And so I can't really, I know we're using him as an example.
By the
But
way, and before we continue, I'm not bashing John Donaher, okay? For anybody
no,
watching,
no,
not to bash him at all. I just
no,
observed that he never even had a girlfriend. Like
right,
I've heard
right,
people talk about his students saying, "I'm trying to get him to learn." Like he's asking me questions about what to say to a girl, and he's like, "No, I'm not bashing him. I'm just looking at this
yeah,
outside
yeah,
of jujitsu. It's like he's great at jujitsu, but
yeah,
everywhere else seems just like he's trying to catch up. No offense."
for sure, for sure. Yeah. Um, with folks like that, it's the people that it attracts, right? Again, that might be a good lifestyle for them. That might be something that works really well for them. What I have noticed again is the types of people it attracts in the culture that jujitsu is today. Jujitsu's culture, like if you just watched what is it called? I don't watch it. The CGI, the CJI.
The Craig Jones
Yeah,
Invitational. I'll just say it
yeah,
because
yeah.
I forget.
So
It's
yeah,
CGI.
yeah,
The CJ. It's Craig
yeah.
Jones. Yeah, J. CJI, I think it is. Good.
Yeah. So if you kind of watch what I have observed in the jujitsu culture, just in the past, I think it really got heavy in the last 8 to 10 years. Um, it's a completely different culture than what jujitsu used to be and martial arts used to be. It's very much so a show, if you will. Everybody is about kind of me, I, fame, 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 and whatever gets the likes on the Instagram is what I have observed jujitsu to be. And I think it's also just it's a general culture shift in our world today. I don't know what you call them, Gen Zers, people after me, right? The culture we have today it's not so much a family oriented community style of people. It's a very much so social media driven, very take kind of a world we live in now. And that just goes for everything, sports in general, right? So it's no different in the jiu-jitsu culture. We just see it a lot heavier because the jiu-jitsu culture is small comparatively to the rest of the world.
And then you mentioned a really good point right there, that how you're comparing two generations between. I'm a millennial. Oh no. I'm at a weird line between millennial and Gen X.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at the things, if I'm looking at things, I don't know where you consider yourself or how, but
I was born
millennial.
in I was born in the 90s, so I guess
Okay,
my millennial.
millennial, kind of millennial,
Yeah,
and whatever else,
yeah.
and then you have Gen Z. But that rather than focusing on that, because then people are like, I hate millennials, or
Yeah, yeah,
use the go back to the generation, the B word,
right.
the B word. It's not the B word you think it is. We're talking about generation, but either way, um, there's an interesting book called Pendulum: How Past Generations Faced Shape Our Present and Predict Our Future by Michael R. Drew and R. H. Williams. It's a good book. It talks about how Western society has these authors felt that Western society has a predictable 40-year shift in idealism between a me system of values or a we way of thinking, which is what you
Yeah,
just kind of said. It's funny because I come from it from
right.
a social psychologist perspective, and you're just looking at it from like just jujitsu and your personal observations, but you just mentioned those exact same things, that
Yeah,
shift, and they were saying like every 40 years it shifts, and maybe that's what's happening because of social media. We're shifting away from a we generation, which I feel is the generation I'm from as a millennial. Like a lot of it was
right.
we. They have that whole Occupy Wall Street movement. The idea was all of us versus the bigger outside forces out there, and that kind of
Yeah,
generation values a community and family and a group of people
right.
that are going to help you take out the bad guy, if you will. And
Right.
then you have the me system, which is the individual becomes strong enough and it's all about them and they're going to change
Yeah,
the system as an individual. So
yeah.
is that kind of what you're touching on right now with?
Yeah, for sure it is. And like I said, like it's just jujitsu's martial arts in general, because it's a competitive culture and today there's not really philosophy being brought in, especially the jiu-jitsu culture. So it's just like a football team, it's just like a sports team, right? It attracts a type of person that wants to be the man or the woman, right? It's a very sizing contest, and who could be the best, who could be the coolest. And kind of like when you mentioned, John Donaher mentioned in his interview, he's never had a girlfriend before. Like those types of people become very, very successful in their industry that they're in, whether they believe that it's a detriment or a plus, then awesome. For me, I tend to look at it more as a detriment. I'm a big believer in balance. I wasn't always like that though, right? I started martial arts when I was 3. Of course, as a child, you take little breaks here and there, but I don't remember a time really that martial arts wasn't a part of my life. I was that teenager, that young adult into my early 20s. I'm 29 now. That everything was about me. Everything was about, if I don't get to class and do my 4 martial arts of that day, nothing else matters. I was that guy that would work jobs that barely got me by just so I could train. And I look at that as, like, in hindsight, it was stupid, but it was also a blessing, because I'm only 29 and I have black belts and instructorships in other martial arts at 29. And I own a successful business with my wife and I, and I'm only 29, right? So there's good and bad with it, right? And with that me, I, things can get pretty sketchy, right? Relationships can get broken, financial issues can happen. But on the plus side, you get really successful in the cool little shiny stupid belts with it. For me, it was, I've been there. I've been that boyfriend, then husband that was kind of a jerk because I didn't want to spend as much time with her and my family. I've got a 5-year-old now, and in her first few years of life, I was very, very selfish. And I look back on that as like, wow, what a horrible, horrible human being that I was. But I also look at it as, that was the past. That old me is buried. But look what came out of that. That's the way I look at things. Some martial arts instructors can't get past that. They still act like they're young adults, teenagers, and they're in their 50s now. You know what I mean? So I think it's a level of maturity and a level-headedness of knowing what you want in life and being able to balance all of that.
And again, it's a values thing, right?
Yeah.
Some people value family and family values. Some people don't. You're being kind of hard on yourself about the first few years. I mean, if you've ever, for any of you watching that don't have kids, the first few years are the roughest, especially for guys, because like that's the time where the kid forms most of their bonds with the mom, and you're just kind of a spectator in this. Even if you are, you could be there as much as you can be, but you really are kind of a spectator to watching, and it's important that they form that bond because that's the person that gave birth to them, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But it can get easy for guys to start focusing on a career at that point in time. As hard as you are on yourself about saying, well, I was really selfish at that time, I've seen that pattern too with a lot of guys, including myself. When my daughter was born was when I decided inadvertently to try to revamp my career as an MMA fighter, which was probably the worst time for it. And it was not easy. And I've seen when I was reading Michael Bisping's book, it was very similar. It was around when he had kids that he really decided to go. And I wasn't even going, I always say this, I wasn't going after to be a pro fighter. It's just a pro fight was offered to me. And I figured I was in Japan. I was supposed to retire. I was already 35 and I knew I wanted to be finished, but I took it anyway. But Michael Bisping, very similar, started having kids. And that's when he realized it puts more on the line. It puts more on the line. Like it's a kind of a do or die. I have a whole family I got to take care of. So it'll do one or two things. It'll either drive someone or break them. And I think that's what kind of happens there too. But it's a weird thing, right? You know, you need to take care of them, so you push yourself harder in your career. And you're, in this case, we're talking about jiu-jitsu people. Maybe you're going to open an academy. Maybe you're going to compete
Yeah.
more, or maybe if you're a fighter, you're going to fight more, trying to make more money. But at the
Right.
same time, those things take you away from your family.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah. And then you also mentioned the individual as far as how it might help them, being
Yeah.
me. And another thing about jujitsu and fighting in particular, it very much is me
Yeah.
compared to, and then like as we talked about sports jujitsu, and you can check out the podcast here for that. But
Yeah.
one thing that's different about sports jujitsu and the other sports is that it is really about you.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And it's a totally different culture, right? As a competitor in the past, uh, if you don't focus on yourself, let's say that you're trying to teach on top of competing, you're not going to be the best teacher or the best competitor or best teacher. If you're trying to raise a family and keep that separate, one is always going to take over the other, right? Um, that's just kind of the way that the competing goes in whatever field you're in. I've got fighters right now that they put things on pause and they focus 100% on that fight and on that training. And for some people, that's awesome. I feel like for especially the people that are just starting out in life, where maybe they just got a few bills, they don't have a family, that's great for them. But eventually, either you stay on that path and it's just kind of about you. And I'm not saying that's wrong, or you eventually grow up or meet somebody and get married, or you maybe the fighting or competing didn't work out and you're trying to hold on to a pipe dream, but now you got to be a big boy, a big girl, and get a different kind of job, uh, all the while trying to keep that going, right? Or you completely give up the dream and focus on one thing. So it's a very difficult road, but I think every person within the martial arts community, because that's what we're sticking on, is they need to sit and have an internal conversation with themselves and really ask themselves, what do you want? If you want to be a UFC fighter, then you've got to know for sure that that's your path in life and go after it. If you want to be a teacher, be the best teacher. If you want to be a family man, family woman, be that. If you want to try to keep both, which is what I'm doing right now, I'm trying to be a teacher and a family man. You have to make sure that you're setting hard boundaries, which is I'm still learning how to do it to this day. But you've got to learn how to set hard boundaries. And for me, I think the only thing that has gotten me through where I'm at today is my faith. But it's a hard road. And especially for a young person, man, it's like you're still growing up yourself, right? Where I feel like the older folks, you're already in your 30s, that kind of thing. It's like belts, right? Like in your you just turn 18 to 20s, you're in your white belt going into blue belt phase. And then when you're in your 30s, you're in your purple belt phase, 40 brown, and then 50 black, right? So I'm still in I feel like I'm in my deep blue belt phase where I'm getting like I've got like 3 or 4 stripes on my blue belt and I'm just starting to like get into the groove here.
And if we look at this from a psychological perspective, so when I start mentioning things, I don't want to go too far into theory because I always lose people when I do that. But when you look at those stages, and this is coming from Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. So if you want to look into that, Google that, and you'll go into greater detail for that. I don't want to break down the whole theory in 2 minutes. But these stages in life, some psychologists say they happen between ages. I argue they happen for different people at different times according to what's happening in their life. So like age sometimes has to do with it. Sometimes age has nothing to do with it. I've met people
Sure.
who are older than me that I don't think they ever got past their 20s. Like,
Man, I
what
know those
person-
people. I know those 100%.
so like so and this kind of does have to do with what Erickson said. Erickson's argument was the reason this 60, 70-year-old is acting like a selfish 20-year-old
Yeah.
who at 70, you know, at 70, 60, they've already been through like 3 divorces and they're still at the bar and
Yeah.
acting like, you know, or whatever it is they're doing, or they're still trying to pursue some sort of crazy pipe dream of $1 million business, and they're abandoning their family, deadbeat dad. His
For
argument
sure.
was that it's because they didn't resolve that issue in their 20s, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just and they just kind of got stuck in that phase trying to get to that next part where they were going to be successful, where you're trying to find yourself as an individual, you find out who you are, and then your next
Mhm.
stage is using that individuality, whatever you identify as, to create a path for yourself in life. In this case, jujitsu. You
Yeah.
identify as a jujitsu player, so therefore you're going to go to enter tournaments and win gold, and then next you're going to open an academy and start a big academy, because that seems to be like the path if we're using
It's kind
jujitsu
of the thing.
as the pattern, right?
I would, yeah, and I would add on to that, right? In Henner Gracie talks heavily about this. Is when you become an instructor, you own a school or something like that. Um, you you tend to get like a god complex, right? Like people are looking up to you so much, and depending on where you're at in your life, if you kind of tend to be a little bit more of the cocky, like it's all about me, or things like that, that's gonna really exemplify. I like to think about it kind of like steroids, if you will. You take steroids, it's going to exemplify what you are. So if you're kind of a jerk, it's going to exemplify it, right? A lot of people, a lot of people like to say that jujitsu changes lives for the better. And I used to think that. I used to think, oh, if this person does jujitsu, they're going to be a better person because of the philosophy, because of all that. I'm finding that's not true. If you're a jerk, jujitsu is just going to make you a jerk that can hurt people, right? The Valente brothers talk about this. They tell a story about they had a guy that was he was an ex criminal. He was in prison. I won't get into what for, but he was telling his teachers, the Valente Academy, I feel like when I'm here at the academy, I'm in church. And by no means are they a religious place or anything like that. But what I'm getting at here is the culture that is there at the school and what the instructors are exemplifying through their actions and through what they do is what makes people better people, not the art itself. Because you could, man, I know a lot of Kajukembo guys that are just like everything they want to do is just punch, kick, fight. It's because it's not the art, it's the people that go into it, right? So for me, I think it's so important and my wife does a good job of this. She always kicks me in the butt if she feels like I'm kind of getting a God complex, right? So keep yourself in check and be humble because you are in charge of lives here, right? Everybody looks to you. So I think it's a God complex that a lot of martial arts people get. And that's where you can start getting into trouble with, hey, if you catch, which I don't do, but if you catch me at a party and I'm drinking excessively, right? Am I being a good example to my students? But because it's all about me, you're an example to all of your students and the jujitsu martial art community in general. So for all the martial arts instructors that are out there, I don't care if you compete. I don't care if whatever you do in your personal life is whatever. But understand that people look up to you. Be an example for those people.
And then, and now I'm going to switch gears.
Yeah.
I mentioned Roger Gracie, and the reason I mentioned Roger Gracie is because when I was listening to the podcast of his history, they were saying that in the beginning of his jiu-jitsu career, he had a lot of accomplishments, but out of
Mm-hmm.
the person who presented his history said one of the things that Roger did at the very end of his life, towards the end of his career, is at towards the end of it, he started seeing that some of the other Gracies, I'm not going to mention any names because they mentioned a lot of names, nothing. Some of the other Gracies were making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And Hajar comparatively, and we use this word comparatively loosely here, felt he wasn't getting a piece of that pie. And then he started, and a lot of this, they started quoting people that were on his team. He started bringing up contracts, and he never really brought up contracts before. And it was this thing like, he started asking for more in his contracts. He started asking for more royalties out of his contracts, out of his schools, out of his fighters, and all that stuff. And it happened later in his life. And the person that was presenting the history was like, well, it's not that what he did was wrong. It was just, he just felt if he would have done it sooner, he would have made more money. If he would have done it sooner, he would have made more money, but he did it later. And that's why some of the other Gracies overshadow his history because of their accomplishments and how money's kind of tied to that. And so it was just like this idea that Hajar at the end of his life, towards the end of his life, realized, oh, I kind of missed this boat. I missed the boat. Like I could have been doing this and had a lot more money than what I have now. And it kind of came in later. Like, and again, this goes again with the idea of the culture and what you expect out of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, like, if we're gonna stay on that boat for a second, it's not so much, oh, I missed out. You didn't miss out on anything. You had the same opportunity that every other jiu-jitsu instructor and Gracie had, right? He chose to compete, or maybe he was even pushed into competing, right? Where when you compete, again, it's about winning a medal, right? Not about making money. You're competing to get your name up someplace, right? Now, yeah, you can make money doing that. There's no money in the jiu-jitsu competition world, to tell you that. But that was his path he chose, where other people looked back at their lives, maybe had more business sense and said, fighting is not going to make me money. These people are already doing that. And it shows they're not making a lot of money. They're really cool guys, but how can I make money? How can I serve my community as a teacher and as a businessman? So for that was, do you feel left out? Oh, I'm so sorry. When you were competing for yourself, there were other people figuring out ways, how can I make money and how can I better the community, right? So that goes for everybody, not just somebody like Hajar. There's this thing where people go on this path of, I want to fight, I want to compete, so I'm going to live in a closet, I'm going to sleep on the mats, I'm going to work at McDonald's 2 days a week, and then I'm just going to compete and get super good. That's great, but most 90% of us are never going to get there, right? Like I thought at one time, oh, I'm pretty good at this MMA thing, I'm going to get into the UFC one day. Boom, I get injured. And I'm like, well, that's done, right? I'm never going to be a UFC star now. So what now? What now? But the thing is, too, is jiu-jitsu instructors, martial arts instructors, they don't have backup plans. And I'm a firm believer in burning the boats, right? If this is your dream, burn all the boats. You have no choice but to make this happen. But especially in the jiu-jitsu world, you get super good at competing. You win all these medals, and then your career's done. You decide to open up a school and try to make some money doing that. And you get pissy because you're not making much money. You don't have much students. Well, I mean, you don't have anything to give other than your skill that maybe you can't even physically show anymore because you're so beat up. So a good, mature businessman would say, okay, well, how do I make money after this competition life? And we see it with everybody. We see it with all the high level competitors, and we see it with a lot of UFC stars today. Where are they today? They're still trying to pick up fights because they ain't got no money.
And then, so you mentioned a lot of good points here. So let's go back to real quick to a clarification for Hajar Gracie. It wasn't really that he wasn't making money. It was that his students, when they would fight, he wasn't doing what the other academies would do as far as contracts that took giant chunks for them
Sure.
fighting. So when he'd corner people, he wouldn't take as much of a percentage as the other people would.
Yeah.
And so like, and then when he tried to change it, when he's like, oh, he found out that his competitors were going to 15 to 20% or more, and he was only
Yeah.
charging 5%. And so I think some of the stores he wasn't charging anything. He just like just pay for my travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
When he found that out, he tried to reverse it, and then the fighters felt betrayed, right? Because he already set the precedent of like, hey, just pay for my travel. So like, what do you mean? I also you want 20%, right? So like, and then they both felt betrayed, right? Like he felt betrayed.
Yeah.
Like, why are you going to turn around now and sign a contract with my competitor, and they're doing the same thing when I did that for you for nothing? But they're looking at it. Oh, you're betraying me because you weren't charging me nothing, and now that you see some money, you're getting greedy. So like,
yeah.
So I just want to clarify that, and that's kind of like, I'm going to leave it right there, because now we're going away from my main topic of sacrificing everything. Well, maybe it isn't, right? He's sacrificing everything for jiu-jitsu. He had this for his culture. It was, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do it for free, or I'm going to do it for minimal money. And I hope that one day it's going to turn around and it's going to be paid forward. Like it's going to some good karma deal.
Hey man, I do it right out of the good graces of my heart. I want to serve, right? So if I have a fighter that goes, hey, I got offered this fight in California, I need a coach. Will you come coach me? I myself, hey, pay for my stuff, pay for my airfare, whatever, here, there, and I'll come and support you. No problem. But there comes a point in time where that has to end. But you also have to set that up, right? But if that's something you don't want to set up with your fighters, then you need other things in play. Like for me, my money is not coming from the folks that compete and I charge them whatever it is to make money. I'm doing that out of the good graces of my heart. What's paying my bills is the academy, right? So are you giving up everything for it? Yes, but are you doing it smartly? Are you thinking about it rather than I believe Hodger is probably a good guy and said, yeah, man, I'll coach you, no problem. And that just happened. That's beautiful, but leave it as that, or have a discussion with your fighters that, hey, I'm going to start you out as this, but know that that this is coming, because that's not sacrificing, putting all your eggs in one basket and sacrificing everything for the martial arts. You've got to be able to take care of yourself too. At the end of the day, this is a business. The Gracies did not come here just to teach jiu-jitsu for free, right? They knew that they had a product that the rest of the world did not, and that the rest of the world would want. So they marketed that product via the UFC, and they could make money, take care of their families, and do whatever they needed to do.
So now let's mention some other points. I'll mention remind me. I'm going to come back to martial arts makes you a better person at the end of this. But we're on this vein of your jiu-jitsu journey and where you're going to start making different avenues, whether you sacrifice everything into one basket. The competitor. Well, let's talk about the competitor. Okay. That's a real tricky one, because technically competing doesn't get you more students. And I think that's where the competitor gets confused. They think if I become number one, then I can tell everyone I'm number one, and that's going to bring a lot of people. But what you're doing is, first of all, yeah, you're a competitor. So you're being very competitive. You're hoping that your number one status, when you start opening your school, first of all, who knows of you? The other jiu-jitsu players, the other jiu-jitsu players. So who most likely is going to start coming to your academy? Other jiu-jitsu guys from other academies. So really, whether you are doing this consciously or subconsciously, you are going out to steal students. That's what you're doing. Now again, whether you're doing this subconsciously or consciously are two different things. But that's kind of like the competitor's mindset. I'm going to be famous in the martial art, and I'm going to open the school. But where are those first few students are obviously going to come from other schools. It's not because it's not going to come from any. There's no such thing as fans of jiu-jitsu that don't do jiu-jitsu. There are, but
like
they're very few.
like I mentioned earlier, uh, folks spend their entire lives to be number one. What happens? You walk into any academy, any judo, I will say gym, not an academy. You walk into any BJJ gym, MMA gym. What do you see on the wall? All the medals, right? You see all the belts and all the medals of that coach. He's thinking, if I win all of these things and everybody knows me as the best of the best fighter, they're going to want to come learn from me. That's simply not true. That's not true, because you are just catering to one little grain of sand of population that would want to learn martial arts. I tell you this, there are blue belts that run schools that teach 1,000 times better than champions, black belt champions. They teach better and they have more students than that champion black belt. Why is that? Because they have structure, they have a curriculum, they have a culture that the coach is the first one to make this happen. He's got to enforce this and show this through his actions, that he's not just this fighter. He didn't put all his eggs in one basket. He didn't completely throw everything away in his life to be a fighter, because fighters are jerks. He or she decided that I like to fight, maybe I like to compete, but I also want to be somebody that can teach, somebody that has structure, somebody that has a business mind, somebody that, hey, when that little girl comes into your school and her parents come up to you and go, hey, our child has been severely bullied. Can you help this child? And you, as the BJJ coach that's won a bunch of medals, goes, oh yeah, we can help her. And then we just break down her confidence even more through making her spar, because that's all you know how to do, because that's all you've done your whole life. That's wrong. That's wrong. Where you have that parent come in and say, we need help. And you see somebody there that is, I've been there. I know what that's like. I have a heart to serve. And is it maybe, even if you're not a parent, you just have that wanting to serve, that right there is an instructor. That right there is a person that didn't pour only his or her life into martial arts, but made sure that they had other fruits that they could give. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. And again, like for that situation with that black belt champion, I've known a few people like that came to my gym, and I don't run a big academy. In fact, most of my students are children. My adult team is not very big. They're very busy. They're always working. And I'm very honest with them about what I do and how I do it and what my background is. I always tell them, I threw away most of my medals when I moved to Japan because I retired. I wasn't planning on opening a school. When I left the States, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm retiring, which is why, like I said, it was kind of like a last minute thing. I ended up fighting again. Now I opened a school because people were asking me for it. But and they're always tripped out about that. I don't have a bunch of medals. I only kept like one or two of the medals I got while I was out here, and I threw away all my other trophies that I had from the US because I didn't want to travel with it. And I told them, it's probably my fight record is probably like 50-50. Like half the fights I won, half the fights I lost at this point. I came in late. I'm very honest about it. Some people, though, in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community hear me say that and assume that I must not know what I'm doing.
That's lame.
And like I said, and then they've called me out on it, and I'll always just remind them. I'm like, hey, I told you earlier, I'm not a champion. I never said I was a champion. It was never my goal to be a champion. It's just something I enjoy doing. Now, for those same people that are doing that, it's because they have that championship mentality. I've observed them, and I've observed their programs, and I think one of the biggest problems they have is trying to get over themselves. Like, the reason they don't have more students, and like they come to my academy, and they try to poach my adult students, and I told them, yeah, go ahead, you can roll them, I don't care. You can teach here. I
Yeah.
don't care. Like you can do whatever you'd like. If you want. Yeah, I
Yeah.
tell them you should go over to so and so's academy because there's not a lot of academies in my area. You want to get some extra
Right.
rolls? He's right over there. And they're always confused because I had one guy come in here and I even said you can let the guys know when you're gonna roll, and he was upset that when the days he wanted to come, no one wanted to come, and I'm like, well, I don't know what to say. I'm not telling him not
Yeah.
to come, right? But what I observed out of this champion was he was the biggest barrier to his own. I don't know what his goals are, but he does
Mhm.
fit the same pattern of someone who gave everything for jiu-jitsu, drove 2 hours away from where we're at to train 5 days a week and become this champion.
Yeah.
Paid for everything out of his own side business that he had as a photographer. Didn't start a family till later. Got married later. Got married much later in his 40s because he put everything in for jiu-jitsu. And then when he tried to open his academy, it wasn't the academy that he thought it was going to be. He's got like 1 or 2 students.
Sucks for you, bro.
Yeah, so
It's the I don't know how it is in Japan, but I know here in the United States, like it's a free market, right? You can do whatever you want. It all comes down to that person. They feel like I've put so much effort into winning and being this person I am today. Who are you as, let's just hypothetically say, a blue belt, opening up a school and have more students than I do when I could kick your butt and I can create champions and you can't? That's not what the people want. The people want somebody that they can follow and be proud of that they follow. And again, I have my faults too, right? Just like you do, just like everybody else does. And it's our jobs to work through those faults, own up to them and work through them. But like you just said, these instructors, these people put everything they have into one thing, and that becomes their identity, right? Their identity is a winner. And then when you don't win, you're a sore loser, right? So again, we're kind of leading into, does martial arts make you a better person, right? Boom, there you go. Segue. You're welcome.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, I mean that's how it is, right? And I deal with the same thing. I am only 29, but I have so many injuries from trying to compete and fight and do the things that I've wanted to do in life. I can't physically compete anymore. And there's people that think they're much better than me, which they probably are. Good for them. But I'm providing a service to the community that better suits what the individual coming to me wants. There's a lot of people, and I tell people, we have people come in our school all the time. Hey, I want to compete, or I want to have more of that rough and tough BJJ dog eat dog mentality. And I go, awesome for you. There are other schools. We have so many schools in our area that can provide a good service for you. For us, we're focused on self-defense. We're focused on the stay-at-home mom that wants to learn to defend herself because she had a bad experience. That's who we focus on. And I like to make mention, we have an MMA team. We have people that do compete, but that's not what we're about. And if that's what you want, then we suggest our friends down the road to you. They'll take good care of you, right? So for those guys, sucks to suck, man. You put all your eggs in one basket. You have maybe an ego problem. You can't get over your identity of who you think you are. And now you're at where you're at. So maybe it's a time to be humble and learn from your mistakes and say, you know, maybe this isn't working. Let me recreate myself. Let me baptize myself, right, if you will, and change into this new thing. And the old me is gone. I still like to compete. I still have that mentality, but I'm this new thing. Let's try this new thing. And maybe you might get more students, maybe you won't. But yeah, it's the problem of people make winning their identity, and they spend how many ever years to make that their identity. And then when that identity is not working for them anymore, they have nowhere else to go.
And then So going to our segue of does martial arts make you a better person? I'm listening to Chuck Norris's autobiography, who he's also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, by the way. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. Yes, he is.
He worked with the Machado brothers. He actually is he's one of the secret driving forces that financed Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to come into America. He saw it.
Yeah.
He met Helio. He talks about it in his book, and then he
Mhm.
brought it over. He decided to do a deal, and he
Yeah.
incorporated it into his already firmly established schools as like the last part of the curriculum. Now you can
Yeah.
start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Why am I
Yeah.
mentioning Chuck Norris? Because throughout his whole book, he talks about how martial arts is going to make you a better person, and there's a lot of there's no way around it. If you read the book, he's very, 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 what's the word I'm looking for? Honest about his faith and his love of Christ and God, and
Absolutely.
it gets kind of preachy. And I'm personally not my taste, but I feel that if you listen, when I like listening to autobiographies because I can really pick apart how someone thinks and figure out what makes them who they are and how they tick. And so
Yeah.
he had this weird cross between his Christian faith and martial arts, which kind of became like this almost inseparable at some points of the book.
Yeah.
And martial arts makes you a better person was like a big core statement and
Yeah.
almost like a mission statement in that book.
Right. Right.
And then towards the end of the book, and I'm thinking, because I know someone, he said he was faithfully married to his wife for 30 years or something like that. And I know someone who said they dated him. And I'm just like,
Mhm.
there's something not adding up here. We're 30 years into the book and he's not mentioning a divorce yet. Not that being divorced is a bad thing, but I'm just saying, like, I'm just trying to put my timelines together because I'm reading his book, but I know someone who personally dated him. I know a young woman who met him and dated him. She didn't have a lot of nice things to say about him.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, what's going on? But he was honest. He brings it up in the book. 30 years in, he says he gets it, and I'm not so like I don't have to worry. I hope I don't have to worry. It's his book. It's his book. So it's his life story. It's made into public discourse. But he talks about how he finds out 30 years after he gets divorced, and he finds out after the divorce, he gets contacted by a young woman who ends up being a daughter that he had from a relationship, a side relationship he had. And
Yeah.
he mentions that he faltered from his core
Yeah.
beliefs, if you will, for a moment there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does martial arts make you a better person? I want to argue that it can,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't guarantee it. In fact, I want to say
Yeah.
there's no guarantees. Look, I'm not bagging on martial arts here, jujitsu, and I said this earlier, and I'll even say I'm not even bagging on religion here. Okay, I'm not bagging on religion. What I am saying though is you make you a better person.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are if you feel the need to do something to become a better person, then it's your responsibility to find whatever that is that's going to help you accomplish that. And people have
Mhm.
accomplished that through many means. Some people martial
Yeah.
arts, some people faith in religion, some people it's skydiving. So like so like if but that's up to you. That's really what I want to say is
Yeah.
that is up to you as the individual to say, I want to be a better person. Let's say you were a horrible person. I've met people that were horrible people, awful people, like most of their life, and then just had this epiphany in late in life that, hey, I've been an asshole most of my life,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
gonna change it now. Now is the time to change. And people will pick different paths for this. Some people pick religion, some people pick jiu-jitsu, some people pick a step program. Whatever it is you end up picking, though, what I want to say to that person is you have to make that decision for yourself. And whatever avenue you decide to pick, don't expect that to change you because you need to change you. Don't expect that to change you because that can backfire real quick. Because like you said, if you go into the wrong culture, you just get wrapped up into something else.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Like with Chuck Norris, a lot of people get down on that and they like to, this isn't a religion podcast by any means, right? But he's a human, right? Just because, a lot of people like to put that stigma as, because he said he was this and then he messed up. Well, now he's not this anymore, right? I can tell you, for me, like, again, martial arts is not going to change you as a person. For me, it took faith in Jesus for me to change, right? And a lot of people that knew me in the past, they like to say, well, you were just this guy that if somebody looked at you wrong, you'd punch them in the face and start destroying them if you could. Yeah, that was the old me. It's kind of like, and this is the only thing I'll say. It's kind of like there's a story of a woman at a well, and everybody knew her as a whore. And one day a man came to that well and changed her life. And she no longer had to identify as this prostitute. She was saved, right? That's for me, that's what changed me. Martial arts, if taught in the right context, let's say we have I have a young kid in my school right now, very, very hard childhood. He came in, he crosses his arms like this, and he just kind of stares. He doesn't know any better. Can we use the philosophy of the school of love and encouragement and kindness and teaching him how to be more courageous and more self-confident? Slowly but surely, Angelo, over the course of a few weeks that he's just been with us, that crossed arms has now gone to this. A smile, right? So yes, martial arts can change somebody if we are giving them the right tools. Just because you're teaching somebody how to punch somebody in the face or choke somebody out, that's going to make you a worse person, man. If you are that person. But if your instructor is lovingly, hey, you are confident enough that you can defend yourself. But how about, instead of punching that bully in the face, how about having a man-to-man conversation with that bully? And then if you need to defend yourself, you do it. But give them the tools to do it, right? If you have a person that maybe, let's just say, is really into drugs, and they come and start jiu-jitsu, but your culture of your school, your philosophy is very, do whatever the heck you want. It's a free world, blah, blah, blah. That person's just going to become dangerous on top of a drug addict. But if the instructor is not necessarily pointing fingers at that person going, drugs are bad, but that person is watching this instructor going, there's something about that instructor. He's healthy. He's always got a clear mind. And you say as an instructor in your philosophy part of the class, guys, maybe we don't want to put anything bad in our bodies that might change our mind, because then we don't have control of the situation. Just something as simple as that, like a self-defense talk, and you're exemplifying it as an instructor, that person will go, I might want to change my life because I don't want to be like this anymore. Or, that instructor looks very clear. He seems very well-spoken, very, very professional. He's got a grasp of life, if you will. Maybe that will lead that person to want to do it. Again, going back to the Chuck Norris thing, he's in his book, he's saying what he was and what he is today. Lead by example, right? Lead by example. You should every day should act as if you're on trial. And whether you want to go into the religious context of you better be found guilty of being a Christian, or you better be found guilty of being somebody in the martial arts community that people love, or you're found guilty of, he's a fraud. So martial arts can change the lives of people if philosophy is being taught. See, Grandmaster Other Gracies in Jiu Jitsu, you were not allowed to get a professor's diploma unless you showed these virtues as an apprentice. If you didn't show virtues, courageous, having self-control, things like that, right? You didn't get a professor's diploma. So I feel like as instructors, we should be doing this because martial arts should change people's lives, but it's the philosophy, not the art.
And so finally, this brings us to our wrap up. Sacrificing everything for jiu-jitsu. What I want to say before I go is I'm not harping on making something you love and doing something you love as much as you can. I want to clear that up. But I am giving a warning to those people who may not even see it coming. Because when you do put everything, all your time, like the black belt I was talking about earlier, into something you love, it can get really easy to forget your life work balance and to forget that once you've made jujitsu, in this case jujitsu, but we can say martial arts, we can use a lot of different topics. We'll say jujitsu. Jiu-Jitsu is going to now be your life. Remember that you made this decision for Jiu-Jitsu to be your life, but the other people in your life did not make that decision. You made that. You made this decision, and I just want to warn you: don't forget about the other people in your life. Don't be hard on the other people in your life because maybe they're not going to make that decision, and you don't have to make that decision because that was your decision that you made. They didn't make that decision. What do you want to wrap up with?
I would say like exactly what you said. It was your decision. I think it takes a person again needs to sit and ask themselves, is this what I want to do? And these are the repercussions of what is to come if I choose this path. Because we all have to answer for what we've done, right? So if you're like, I want to be a competitor in I want to be this, burn every single boat that you have and focus on that and become that. There's no choice. There's no choice. Do it. But also through life, you get into relationships, you get into business, you get into anything like that. Understand that those people, those things came after. Now, what is more important, right? So try to find balance in your life. If you want to be a champion, do it. But also sit down and play with your baby girl. You know what I mean? Take your wife on a date. Talk to your students. Have friendships, right? It doesn't always have to be jujitsu, I. So just sit down, ask yourself, and constantly remind yourself that you're a human, but your impact on other people is a big thing. So try to, in a sense, walk on eggshells.
Yeah.
Martial arts can change lives, but it's how you go about it.
Yeah. Jiu-Jitsu can be your life, but it doesn't have to be all of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been another episode of the Social Jello with Angelo podcast. I want to thank Kai for coming out and sharing his thoughts on this. How about you guys, girls? Boys and girls? Maybe there's young kids. I don't know. Hopefully not. I say no young kids on my thing, but I think I only used 2 cuss words today. Not bad. Yeah. What do you think? Should you sacrifice everything for jiu-jitsu? Yes, no, maybe. Personal stories in the comments, throw it out there. If you're one of those people that sacrificed everything for jiu-jitsu and it turned out great, share your secrets with us. Put them in the comments. If you're of the other camp, put it in there, have a conversation. The people on my channel are very open to have conversations. I've been very proud of them for not destroying each other. even when they disagree, I've seen them. It's a pretty cool community of people that are in the comments right now. I can't speak for the internet, so that's my last warning to you. Oh, he said everything will be fine. This guy called me all these names, so I can't speak for everyone, but I can say that most of the people are martial artists. So at least, even if you don't decide to comment, maybe you can get something out of the comments by reading through there. So check them out. Catch y'all next time.